everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss some movements and debuts of the Billboard Hot Dance charts in immaculate detail, with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. Oh wow, I'm really worried about 2024 now because this is the second week in a row that's just not done anything for me. I mean, at least it was a little bit more interesting. There are a few debuts that did genuinely surprise me. Problem is though that a lot of them just aren't good at all, and just like last week, some of them can be really damn boring and really damn forgettable to boot. I hope that the charts are going to get better than this because it's a bit concerning going into the beginning of the year, but still, this was just not a good week at all. But for now, the top 10, where Strangers by Kenya Grace at number 1 is still holding on with a considerable amount of momentum going forward. The radio is on board considerably, the streaming is still going strong, the sales are up. Let's hope this actually gets into the top 50. It's got every single reason to. Come on, let's make this an actual hit on the Hot 100, guys. And it's not like anything's challenging it anymore, as I'm Good Blue by David Guetta and Bebe Rexha is just collapsing across the board, especially on radio at number 2, and Ecstasy by Suicidal Idol is stalling out on streaming, and that's all it's really got at number 3. But now, the big story that I think everyone was going into this episode expecting me to get really annoyed about, debuting at number 4, Five Nights at Freddy's by the living Tombstone, which got this spot off the back of huge streaming and sales thanks to the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie as well as Halloween. Given that the song came out 10 years ago and both formats are really starting to collapse already, I don't expect this to last in the top 10, and honestly, given the status as a recurrent song that came back, that honestly means that this might actually fall out pretty damn fast. We might see one of the worst performing top 5 songs in recent memory, and honestly, when we get to the song later on, I can't really complain there. Anyways, this didn't really do a whole lot in terms of impact, as Baby Don't Hurt Me by David Guetta, Anne Marie and Coil Ray held steady in number 5, as even though it's falling across the board, radio is still strong enough to keep this up, more so than Rush by Troye Sivan at number 6. Now look, this was going to collapse across the board given that it's still losing streaming off the back of the album's boost, but the fact that it's falling this fast is really damn unfortunate. It's a great song, it deserved much better radio support than this, and unfortunately this means that Lovely Bastard by Itachi Gang and Zwayhander is probably going to go higher than where it is currently in number 7, although given that it's only relying on streaming, I don't expect us to hit the Hot 100, and good riddance to its absolute garbage. Same case for both Odetari songs, with GMFU with Barely Human in number 8, and I Love You Ho with 9 Life surprisingly actually rebounding up to number 9 off the back of their own streaming boost, as well as Ela Veriga by Alex Favela, Grupo Margarita de Estrada and Joaquin Medina at number 10. Look, I'm surprised that this is still going back to the top 10, but honestly I can't really complain. As long as radio gets on board with it, this is going to stick around, I'm fine with it. And what's unsurprising, the majority of our fall-offs did not matter at all. I mean, the biggest one was probably Jungle by Alok, the Chainsmokers and Mae Stevens, which was going to fall off anyways thanks to the album's non-impact, but really, this is just not a big song. It's not going to make any year-end list, whatever. Our falls though are much more all over the place and can be split into surprise falls like both by Tiesto, 21 Savage and Beer at 23, and Other Boys by Marshmello and Dove Cameron at 25, although I expect this to get at least a little bit of a rebound thanks to the album, even though it's not on that album. Continued collapses like Losers to Techno by Feed at 48, 10 by Fred Again and Josie at 39, ugh, yikes, and Got Me Started by Troye Sivan at 15. The real story though are our 2 massive debuts from last week, both utterly collapsing, and while I'm not really surprised that nobody's gravitating to Dreaming by Marshmello, Pink and Sting at 31, what I really want to highlight is the shockingly huge fall for In the City by Charlie XCX and Sam Smith, where it somehow managed to fall all the way out of the top 10 down to 36. This is the biggest fall off out of the top 10 on the Hot Dance charts that's ever been recorded, even worse than Mind Your Business by will.i.am and Britney Spears. And if that's not a sign that people really did not care about this song, and Sam Smith has really had a bad run on dance charts in recent weeks between this and Vulgar, yeah, this is kind of worrying going forward, especially for Charlie XCX. She should deserve better than this. Hell, it's more surprising when you look at our jumps and comebacks in regards to this, as even though we didn't have any comebacks this week, our 2 ones just really surprised me. I mean, yes, Sins Let Me In by Kanye rebounded hard up to 18 thanks to a remix with Trippie Redd. That doesn't really surprise me, but the continued surprise for me is the massive push for Fashion by Brittany Manson up to 16. And look, it's got momentum on TikTok, so streaming has really gotten on board with it, but still, for a song of this kind, I'm surprised it's doing this well. It might actually survive between years and become a hit. That's not really a bad thing for me though. But on the opposite end, what isn't good are a majority of mediocre at best debuts, starting out with number 50, Jerk by jnhygs and 9 Lives. Another week, another TikTok-leaning song that charts at the very bottom. Although this one I was at least a little bit more intrigued by, given that I did actually like jnhygs' last charting song and Shake That Shit. And 9 Lives has been the main reason why some of Odatare's recent songs have actually been okay for me. Surely the production budget was going to be at least a bit better, right? And this would actually be good. Well, unfortunately, this just did not do much for me. And it's really across the board here as well. It's not just because of jnhygs, and that's really surprising to me. Sadly, it's just not that particularly interesting, going for a muddier trap approach that 9 Lives always seems to do, with some really muddy production that just does not sound pleasant in the slightest. The gang vocals and the intense bass just really do not do much for me at all, especially against the percussion line that reminds me a lot of old school crunk rap, and really it should be a lot more energetic and a lot more fun than what it is. I mean, seriously, for 9 Lives this sounds weirdly off for him. It's not a particularly bad sound, but it just sounds really uninteresting and kind of cheap as all hell. Combine that with jnhygs sounding mostly fine, but not really bringing the energy that they brought to Shake That Shit, and really not elevating a song that sounds this otherwise muddy. And really, this is a big disappointment for me. I mean, I wasn't expecting a whole lot of a TikTok-leaning song, especially given that we've gotten so many of them recently, but jnhygs' last song was really damn good. This, okay, it just does not work for me. Pass. Number 44, Heart Still Beating by Nathan Dawe and Bebe Rexha.
I can't believe I survived all my life is one thing should know.
Definitely a bad song when I was expecting Nathan Dawe to be amongst the best debuts of this week. But hey, given that I've liked 0800 Heaven more than pretty much anyone else at this point, I was honestly expecting that he would go down more of this 90s trance revivalism, given that it's gotten a lot more popular in recent weeks, and really I'm not complaining, it's a great trend. In truth, he just continued on with that sound, going for a short but honestly really effective brand of 90s trance that with Bebe Rexha on vocals that honestly worked way better for me. I mean, yes, the vocal production on Bebe Rexha is a bit rough for my liking. She does sound a bit echoey and robotic in the mix, and that doesn't really elevate the song for me. But man, I like the production here regardless. The bass line is really effective. The atmosphere of this song feels huge and really does work well with the content of love like this. The build-ups are legit great, and the drops have such a huge vibe to them with those synths that sound absolutely stunning. I'm honestly surprised that this hasn't been a sound that Nathan Dawe's explored until recently, because honestly, between this and 0800 Heaven, he's really damn good at this sound. I'm really curious what he does next. I mean, it's a short song, and it's not even my favorite of these 90s trance revival songs that have gotten popular in recent weeks, but still, I was pleasantly surprised how much I really like this, and even if I don't expect it to last, it is a really damn good song. I'm glad it crossed over, at least for now. Number 33, Diamonds and Roses by VaporGod. Yet another song going for a TikTok approach and really being blatantly obvious given that it's from a nobody, and my god, I'm so sick of these. Can we just move on at this point? I get in the age of social media that anything can chart as long as it's got some sort of mimetic appeal, but come on, this is blatant TikTok bait in every sense of the word. I mean, the Jersey Club sections honestly sound quite pretty, going for some really twinkly synths and a really subdued sound that doesn't feel overblown like a lot of Jersey Club is. Honestly, if you made the whole song like this, I actually would not mind it. It's a pretty damn nice sound. Problem is that because this is the TikTok bait song, you have to include the most blatant and boring trap elements I've ever seen in a song. Not only sounding really tedious and dragged out with a really slow runtime and sounding completely devoid of atmosphere, but not even transitioning well from the Jersey Club sections. They kind of just appear and disappear out of nowhere. And again, it's blatant how obvious this is trying to appeal to TikTok, and my god, it just ruins the flow of an otherwise really pretty song. I mean, it's not the worst TikTok bait I've covered in the last year. There's much worse songs than this that are even still charting now. But seriously, I'm so sick of seeing songs like this chart every other week. We can move on to something at least a little bit more interesting and not as predictable and boring as this is. So in other words, even if it's got some pretty moments, it's not good. Skip this one too. Number 28, Zombie by ILLENIUM, Excision, Wooli and Valerie, Broussard. Look, I get why this exists. ILLENIUM's been going down more of a rock direction recently, especially with his last album, so why not cover one of the 4 songs that's been utterly covered to death and completely ruined thanks to god-awful cover after god-awful cover here. And you know what? Why not actually bring back Valerie Broussard, who's been really inactive as of recent weeks, and drag on Wooli and Excision, because God help us all, we really needed another collab between these 3 at this point. I mean, of course you gotta have that extra edge and attitude, so this was obviously gonna be fire, right? Of course it fucking wasn't. In fact, I'll go on the record and say that this might actually be worse than Insanity, and the worst thing that ILLENIUM has actually made in a long time. This is absolutely garbage. Firstly, if you're gonna cover a song, why does it have to be Zombie by Cranberries? This song's already been burnt to the ground, and really as a song about the IRA's attacks around that time, it really does not deserve to be covered. You just completely ruined the idea of the original, and given that none of the vocalists have any sort of personality in the same way that Dolores did, it just makes the song feel cheap and incredibly exploited, and I'm just sick of hearing it at this point. But say what you want about Bad Wolf's god-awful cover, and I'm not one to defend Tommy Vext in 2023 as much as anyone else, but seriously, at least he sounded like he cared. He took the personalized lyrics of the original and made them into something a lot more hard-hitting. You can at least understand why Dolores gave this the approval. Unfortunately, given that Dolores is sadly no longer with us, we have to let this god-awful cover exist, and my god, this sounds atrocious, and it's not helped by Valerie Broussard sounding like she'd rather be anywhere else. I mean, seriously, for someone who has one of the best voices in modern EDM and has been great on every other song that she's charted in recent memory, the fact that she sounds completely tuned out and really out of place here really does say a lot about this song. Even worse is that the production is absolutely lazy and fucking awful. I mean, it's abundantly clear that ILLENIUM's just lost his way when it comes to production in recent weeks, because yes, while this song does have a great atmosphere on the verses, as you'd expect by ILLENIUM, he seems to nail that every single time, the drops are absolutely boring and bland as all hell, with some percussion that sound dry and atmosphere that's non-existent, especially with melodies that don't really float at all. And really, again, the first and last drop on this song should be a lot harder hitting than they are, especially when, once again, you decide to go for the goddamn light, heavy, light approach, with Excision and Wooli delivering one of the laziest second drops I've heard in recent memory. And seriously, I'm getting beyond sick of these 2 at this point. They just recycle the same damn drop every single time that they collaborate with ILLENIUM, and it's just blatantly obvious they did not care here at all. And once again, this formula has been buried into the ground and doesn't sound good at this point. Can we just move on and throw these 2 out? They're not worth it at this point. I genuinely just want all these producers to take a break at this point. This formula is getting boring and fucking overdone, and it's just getting tedious and delivering less results as it keeps going on. So yeah, one of the worst songs that I've covered in the history of this series, and given that I've covered some truly bad songs here, the fact that this pissed me off as much as it did really does say a lot. It's the sort of song that really does feel like an obvious cash grabber, given how exploitative it is, given that Dolores is no longer around. Yeah, fuck this. Number 19, Big FU by Dawe, Guetta, Ayra, Starr, and Lil Durk.
You never reply. And I seen all the pictures that you post. Oh no.
At this point, I have no idea what to expect out of Dawe, Guetta in 2023. I mean, both of his big hits in 2023, I really don't care about, even if I have warmed a bit on I'm Good Blue. But his other stuff outside of that have actually been pretty damn solid, especially with songs like 1 in a Million and On My Love doing pretty damn well and actually being pretty solid songs. So to see him work with Ayra, Starr, and Lil Durk, of all people, suggested that he was going to go for more of a hip house sound, and yeah, that's exactly what happened here. Although I will give him credit, I actually like this one. I fair bit. I mean, the big factor of my enjoyment here is Ayra Starr, who has a lot of personality and really does flow well over this production quite well. There's a reason that she's become so popular in Afrobeats in recent memory, and yeah, songs like this really do prove that she's got the pipes to really sell it. I was surprised with how much I like the production too, with the remarkably smooth hip house beats and a much more relaxed vibe, and the fact that it doesn't feel overblown, which for modern David Guetta is honestly a big compliment. He really nailed the vibe here quite well, especially with the production being so spacious and letting the vocals really do shine through as the main driving force of melody here, even if the backing melodies are actually pretty damn subtle and really do sound quite nice. I mean, I will say that Lil Durk does sound a little bit strange being on songs like this, given that he hasn't really done this sort of hip house sound in the past, but honestly, if this is what he delivers, I was actually pretty impressed. I'd like to see him do more of this. He's actually pretty damn solid for it, especially when he goes for a more melodic approach that actually works for the song quite well. I mean, there's not a whole lot there that stands out as particularly special, but given that it's not trying to go for any sort of grandiose or really anthemic sort of sound, I was honestly surprised that I liked this as much as I did. In fact, I would not be complaining this sticks around. It's actually a pretty damn solid song. I'm genuinely surprised by it, but I actually really enjoyed this. So yeah, check this out. It's perfectly fine. And finally, number 4, Five Nights at Freddy's by the living Tombstone. It feels weird that this is the first time that the living Tombstone has actually charted on the hot dance charts, especially given they've got a really supportive and really vocal minority fan base and have been building up a decent amount of momentum in their over 10 years as a duo. So to see this song from 2014 managing to chart now thanks to the movie and of course Halloween really had me curious, although unfortunately I will admit right out the gate that I'm not at all a fan of the living Tombstone style of video game parody music, and especially here given that I've never at all been a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, both in the games and especially with this movie, and really this had an uphill battle for me regardless. So surprise, I was not a fan at all of this song for really the same reasons that I'm not at all a fan of the living Tombstone's music, and it just sounds weird on this chart nowadays. The vocoder vocals sound really flat, as does the production, where the mixing is utterly awful as the rock elements get smothered out alongside the vocals with some really baffling dubstep integrations that have not aged well in the slightest. And the content is trying way too hard to be deep and meaningful over the villains of Five Nights at Freddy's and how they really interact with the world, to the point where it's just utterly tedious and really kind of pretentious when you think about it. It's a sort of song where, while I get why people would enjoy it, it's definitely got a niche audience, especially with the content of the lyrics. This is a sort of song that just not aged well at all. And given that it's tied to a franchise that I've had absolutely zero interest in revisiting, as well as a name that just never has done anything for me and has really gotten bad over the past few years, yeah, this is the sort of song that, while I'm happy it's here as a novelty, it's at least interesting, it's not remotely good. And given how badly it's aged and the fact it's only here thanks to a brief moment that's not gonna last, yeah, let's hope this goes away. I'm not a fan of this at all, skip this. But it's only getting the Dishonourable runner-up, as the worst is easily going to that absolute garbage of a cover of Zombie by ILLENIUM, Excision, Wooli and Valerie Broussard. My god, these guys need to really hang it up at this point, or at least take a bit of a break. They've really been disappointing as of recent weeks, and this song is not good at all. For the best, okay, honestly, it was very limited given how mediocre at best this week was, and even if I do like Big FU by David Guetta, Ayra, Starr and Lil Durk, it's actually gonna get the honourable runner-up, with the best surprisingly going to Nathan Dawe and Bebe Rexha with Heart Still Beating. Yeah, yikes, but hey, I'm not complaining, it's a great song. Next week, I gotta hope that the charts improve, because these last 2 weeks have been fucking miserable. Although with the songs that are guaranteed to drop out, it at least could be interesting. There's at least some promise. I will take what I can get. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.